Welcome to Books to Africa on Air, where we discuss interesting topics with a special focus on Africa. My name is Chizoba James, and I'm your host on today's show with the topic Reading in the Dark. Now, joining me today, I have Mr. Tonson Sango and Mrs. Precious Sango. So we're going to be discussing this topic as we go. Okay, so welcome, guys. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
I have my first question, and it is it possible to read in the dark at all?
No.
Well, yes and no.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's not possible to read in the dark if you haven't got light. So the question, I guess, is supposed to draw our attention to the fact that many people in rural parts of Africa don't have electricity, don't have constant power supply. Yeah. And so for students who live in those kinds of communities, they find it difficult to read when it's dark.
Oh, okay. That's good. So you mentioned rural.
Yeah.
So I assume because rural are the parts that don't normally get light.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, rural areas are typically like the villages, areas where there's not a lot of development in terms of access to roads or infrastructure or healthcare or electricity. Mm-hmm. So, electricity is, I think for me, the biggest need, in rural parts. Okay. Right, because I mean we're in the 21st century.
Yeah,
you cannot do anything without electricity.
Yeah.
Or well, you can't do anything significant.
Okay, but how do students read then without electricity? Since you can't read, I mean, how do they go about their education without electricity?
Well, they read with torch lights.
Wow.
So I think the problem is because obviously these students, I mean, because they live in rural parts of Africa,
yep.
And they have family responsibilities at a young age, and for example, when they go to school, they come back late. They have to walk long distances to go to school, long distances to come back home, and then when they get home, they have errands that they have to run for their families. Like going to the market to buy food for the next day. They have to sell things in the market to pay for their fees, and they don't have time to read during the day, so it's at night times when it's dark, and early in the morning when it is dark, that's when they have the time to read, and obviously that's when they read with torch lights.
And also kerosene lamps as well, not just torchlights. I mean, most people use torchlights these days, which is not very great, by the way. First of all, you have to buy batteries. And then, when you imagine trying to read with a torchlight, the light is like reflecting on your face off of the page of the book. So it's not very good for their eyes or for their health. And then even worse for those who use kerosene lamps, because you're looking at a very dim sort of light that, at the end of the day, they end up having like tears running down their eyes when they read, So these are all challenges to their academic performance. Of especially students in rural parts.
Wow. Okay, but during the day, what are the challenges? You mentioned some children, they help their families out.
Yeah.
Is that basically all the challenges it is to reading during the day, since the nighttime is a challenge?
Yeah, I think, just to add to what she said, obviously during the day, right, they go to school. I mean, the typical day in a life of a child, for example, when I went to Nigeria recently, I spoke to some students and I asked them, what's their typical day like?
Yeah.
Most of them told me they wake up as early as 4 a.m., right? Try to read when it's still dark with their torchlights or with their lamps. And then they have to wake up, go to the well, draw water for them to have their bath, then cook, then eat, then walk about, 1 hour to get to school. And then obviously when they're in school, they get, maybe on, a few hours. Most of the day they spend it in school learning from their teachers. And by the way, most of these schools are not very good schools. They don't have books, they don't have resources, they don't have computers, right? And then once they close from school, most of them would then go home, because we're talking about families where they're very low income families, families that live under $1 a day, right? So these children go back home straight away. They're trying to contribute to the income of the family. They have to go to the farm, or they have to straight away go to the marketplace to, sell products. And then after that, they get back home, and if for girls especially, they have to then, cook, or they have to then look after their younger ones. and then before you know it, it's nighttime. And so the only time they get that maybe a few hours before they go to bed to read, and then there's no light.
Okay, but wait, you mentioned you spoke with these children. Did you meet their parents at all to speak with them since this challenge of no light during the night? So do you speak with the parents to see if there's any solution or any way that they can?
Yeah, I visited two families which have very similar problems, right? This rural village in Nigeria there's actually electricity in the village, but many of the homes can't afford to pay for the electricity, right? So they don't have an electric connection into their own homes from the main line, right? And then for those of them who do, there's no power most of the time anyway, right? So the power supply is not constant. But most of them, basically the main problem is they can't afford to even have to pay the bills, to have electricity and pay the bills, right? And then, one of the families, for example, the dad is a farmer, the mom is a trader. She sells stuff in the market. He has a couple of goats that he looks after, and in order to pay her fees. And both families actually had not paid their children's fees at the time when I spoke to them, right? So it's like they have a long list of issues, which boils down to poverty, right? They're not able to afford electricity. They're not able to afford their child's fees, and as a result,
Okay.
Yeah. And something you mentioned, even if they're able to afford to pay the bill of the electricity, it's no guarantee that the electricity is going to be constant anyway. And in some cases where people are well off, they use generators, but obviously these families can't afford that as well. So the best solution for them and for their children is torchlights, or kerosene lamps.
Wow. Yeah. And the torchlights, they'll still, if they can't afford electricity, they can't afford the batteries as well, because it uses batteries, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's still a challenge, even in every area. It's still a problem.
Exactly.
No light, no money to afford it, and still no money to afford the batteries for the torchlights.
Exactly.
And at the same way, damaging their eyes, isn't it? Because it hurts. Wow. So this problem is common. Now you mentioned Nigeria. Is it a common problem to African nations, or is it similar problems they all have in common about rural areas?
I think, we are both from Nigeria, right? So we know Nigeria very well. We grew up there. I went to school in Nigeria. She went to school in Nigeria. So we have a lot of experience going, of the educational system in Nigeria and of the society, right? So this is very common. I think a lot of times people forget how rampant poverty is, right? We, especially in the West, because there's such an abundance of resources, things like electricity, we take them for granted in the West. But in Africa, it's still, something that people need, that communities need, right? But I think all across Africa, if you look at the statistics on poverty, if you look at the statistics on power supply, there's a famous image of Africa at night, and it's just complete darkness, or mostly dark, right? So that gives you the image, right? Most of Africa is, in the sense, Africa is still a dark continent.
Okay, thank you for that. And on our next segment, we'll look on potential solutions where you can share how to overcome this and everything. So thank you, guys. We're going to take a break now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Every day, millions of good books are thrown away. Yet 50% of people who go to school in Africa will not be able to read or write properly because they have no books. Books to Africa collects donated books and send them to projects in Africa. You can donate your books, fund a container shipment to Africa, or become a dedicated sponsor. Please do not throw your books away. Go to www.bookstoafrica.org to get involved. Thank you.
Welcome back to Books to Africa on Air, where we're discussing the topic Reading in the Dark. And I'm going to start with the next question to my guest. Now, we've discussed about the challenges, some of them, but I needed to emphasize more on the challenges, other challenges of education or in Africa, that apart from the reading, the light issue, but other challenges that people do encounter while reading in Africa, and also how can we overcome that?
Well, some of the challenges, like we said earlier, it's obviously reading in the dark, and obviously some students reading with torchlights and kerosene lamps. Obviously, because like we said, running errands, not being able to read during the day when there's natural daylight. And there are other challenges as well, such as educational materials, books, not having access to good quality books, or even furniture in the classroom. Other ones had to do with teachers, not being paid enough, not employing good enough teachers to teach properly, teachers not having the right resources or right access to the educational materials they need to deliver their subject areas properly, and also teachers being paid, very, very poorly, in terms of wage.
I mean, I spoke to one teacher who was teaching in one of these schools, these rural schools, and she was very excited about her job. She loves her job. She's one of the best teachers in the school, and I asked her politely how much she earned, and I mean, I got to find out she earned something like £5 in a month. The equivalent of £5 in a month. And I said, what can that do for you? That's not much, But she said to me, look, the most important thing is I love this job. I love teaching. I love making a difference in the lives of these students. And as long as, I can earn enough to, buy soap and, buy food, put food on the table, that's good enough for me, And that really shows you the African spirit. It's... Africans are many of these people living, especially in rural parts, very resilient people. Despite the fact that they're living in poverty, despite the fact that they don't have electricity, they don't have good roads, they don't have the best schools, they don't have books. I mean, some of their classrooms are literally empty. Some of them don't even have desks.
Okay, so if I can come in there and ask you, we are books, your Books to Africa.
Right.
So what way is Books to Africa helping out, especially in the area of books, these rural areas lacking books? So how do you come in?
Yeah, there's quite, like you said, there's quite a lot of different challenges, right? But we feel like books is the most important, or rather the most urgent, that needs attention.
Okay.
Simply because no matter how, regardless of the state of a school, right? Not having lights, not having desks. As long as the students can have books and the teachers can have books, then we can improve the quality of education, right? The quality of learning, to be specific, and teaching. And that's what really matters, because we don't want to be having students going through school, going through education, graduating, and yet they can't read or write after finishing school. I think that's even a more horrifying fact than the fact that people are not able to go into school in the first place.
Okay, so yes, I do agree with what you said, which is good. It's a very vital point about books. But it still ties down to light as well, because they can have all the books in the world, and if they don't have light to read, like you said, the challenges that some of these people in the rural areas face. They face that when they come back from school, they help their families and do all this, but when they now want to settle back to read in the night, they don't have the light. So what role does having a light as well? So good to have books, but light, don't you think is as well a very vital solution to this, having light?
I think light is very important as well, but what you have to I'm just picturing it. Books, like you said, is very important. It's like immediate in the moment, because they need books. Teachers need books to teach them properly, to do their research, to be knowledgeable about the subject, to give them quality education. Students want books in terms of to know what they're studying, to improve on their knowledge, and to enjoy the experience of learning. And books are important because during the day, they're in school, the teachers are teaching them, they're reading in the school, in the classroom. So let's say from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. they're in school, natural daylight. But when light really comes in, it's at night times when they read, so at night time when they're reading, early in the morning when they're reading, that's where they really, really need the lights to further their independent reading, learning that personal study, and also, so that's where the light comes in. So
I think just talking about research, when I was in that school in Nigeria, I asked the students what are the most important needs they feel what are the most important things they feel they need right now in their school, right? And the first thing was books. The second thing was computers. And the third thing was teachers, right? So in that order, it tells you that even for them, they feel that these are the most important things. However, having said that, light is equally as important, right? And so the issue is, what kind of solution can we have, right? Especially because having light is bigger than just, for example, a charity like Books to Africa. What we do is we collect books in the UK, donated books, we ship them across to different countries in Africa. And so schools in Africa, universities, primary, secondary schools can all apply and request for books through our website, right? And then we just simply take the books, ship it out to them, they collect it from their country office.
Free of charge?
We spend a lot of money, right, collecting the books in the first place, sorting through them, making sure that we have, storing them, cleaning them. And so as a charity, we incur a lot of costs, a lot of expenses, and obviously shipping, which is the greatest expense of all. So what we ask is that schools who request for books contribute a small processing fee to help us cover these costs. That's what we try to do as a charity, which is one solution. But the issue of light is something that is much bigger than any single charity.
Before we go to the light part, have you had feedback on how books that you sent back has helped or improved the students' performance? Have you had any feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the projects that we support with books, they send project reports, which we publish on our website. And you can read through some of the things they write. They're all grateful to have these books. Every single book is useful. I don't agree with people who say that, books are dying and, we're moving into the technological age. That's true for some countries, but not for most of the world, right? So books are still the primary source of knowledge, of information, of education for people in most parts of the world.
Okay, so what difference does having light makes in the students' performance? Because as equal as books are important, light, how do you tie that in? What difference does it make?
I think it comes down to reading, isn't it? Right? Most students, of course, they can read if they are able to read in the daytime, right? Then obviously that problem is solved. But the issue is that they are so busy with other things, they're so busy with life that the only time actually that most students read is either early in the morning or late at night when it's dark. So if we want to improve the reading culture in Africa, if we want to improve academic performances, first of all, we have to provide books so that they have something to read. Secondly, we need to help them with lights, right? And that's something that as a charity, we're looking for partners out there who can maybe come up with solutions such as, for example, a solar-powered LED light that, students can use for 4 or 5 hours when it's dark to read. And that will make a massive difference, I believe.
Yeah, it would definitely make a huge difference because, I'm just thinking back when I was little and, I was like, the example I was giving about the girl earlier on who would run errands, for example, during the day. I remember doing that when I was in primary school. And, if I had lights to study at night, that would help. Because even though we had generators, for example, there was a certain time of the night where the generator would go off. So if it goes off and you run your errands, late, for example, 10 p.m. when you're supposed to start reading, then the generator turns off. You're not going to be able to read. So you would use torchlight or lamp, kerosene lamp. So obviously if we had LED or these students have LED lights, that would last for, a few hours just before or after the generator turns off. Or when there's necessary, it would definitely improve the academic performance and the experience of learning.
Okay, that's very good, and thank you so much for coming
to
the show. And if you want to support Books to Africa, please get in touch. Call the number on the screen or visit the website. And thank you so much for your support.
One of the ways you can get involved with Books to Africa is by sponsoring shipments of books to students in Africa. Every month in the UK, we collect thousands and thousands of books donated by generous donors like you. Now, the next challenge is to ship them out to Africa, to students and to schools that can't afford to buy books. With your support through a donation of £10 a month, we can ship out 50 books every month to students in Africa. Now, to make an even bigger impact, you can sponsor a container shipment with £4,000, and that will ship 20,000 books that will literally transform an entire community. So thank you for your generous support.